I receive comments from people all the time who just think that they're bad at eyeshadow. Like they're just like, I can't do it. And I promise you that's not the case. I pinky swear. It's more so to do with placement. And placement doesn't just mean where you're putting it down. We're gonna get into it, okay? We're gonna talk about it. I'm also gonna be taking you through placements to favor versus avoid, depending on your eye shape. So it might be like almond, round, deep set, hooded, severely hooded. Like we're gonna talk about all of that, okay? The rules that actually matter are going to be your lights versus your darks, okay? That's what we're gonna be focusing primarily on in this video. You need to consider that your darks are going to be pushing things back into space. Your lights are going to come forward in space. It's the same as contouring and highlighting your face, just on your eyes. But placement isn't just about like where you put it. It's also about the direction in which it's being blended. Forgive me, I've been sick. I have a humidifier going, so occasionally you're gonna hear like bloop, bloop, bloop. Okay, so let's talk about the sections of the, stabbing myself in the eyelashes. Talk about the sections of the eyes, all right? So we have like the inner, it's usually broken down into like thirds, right? To make it a little bit easier to understand. We have the inner part, the inner third. We have the center lid right here. And then we have the outer third, the outer V sometimes as it is referred to. So you can think like when you're thinking V, you can think about like the end of your lash line and then into like this crease area generally. Okay, so let's start off with a classic lifted placement. All right, so I'm gonna be using the Rare Beauty eyeshadow palette, just like a very nice neutral palette. This is called Essential Neutrals, aptly named. Okay, so we're just gonna kind of like be hopping around in this palette. So I'm gonna use the Refer Shodo number 2 brush. I'm obsessed with this brush. I just love it so much. Look at it. Ooh, look at that point. Oh, it's so good for blending. Anyway, so for this classic lifted placement, we're going to be focusing on keeping the outer shades a little bit darker. We're going to create like a little bit more of a lift, and we're going to focus on keeping the inner part a lot lighter. So I'm going to be starting off by swirling into this kind of like caramely shade right here. And I'm going to start at the outer part of the eye. Okay, so right here. And what I'm going to do is create an upward lift up towards the tail of the eyebrow. Okay, so focusing like the majority of the pigment here, but you can see that like we're going above the lower lash line. We're kind of following this like swoop of the lower lash line, slowly buffing it into that outer V, the outer third of the eye, and then just diffusing up towards the tail of the brow. And this is obviously going to depend on like how much room you have to work with, if any at all. We will talk about that. Okay, so starting off with that caramely shade, you can already see, if you compare the two sides, that this eye has a bit of a lift. We have sort of this like, I was gonna say horizontal, vertical upward lift toward the brow. I'm gonna dip into the dark brown shade. I'm just gonna use that same brush, just a little bit less. And to just sort of like further hammer this home, I'm just gonna slowly build up the depth of that shadow. So really focusing close to the lash line on the outer third, ever so slightly blending into that crease, and then again diffusing whatever's left over, just not taking it up as high. Okay, you see that difference? And then to really hammer it home, I'm going to grab the O2 brush from Refer once again, and I'm going to grab this matte vanilla shade. It's kind of a peachy vanilla. And I'm just going to place this right in the inner third of the lid. And then just kind of diffuse it out. So we're keeping that inner part nice and bright. Not that it made like that much of a difference, but you know, keeping that nice and bright. And then we're creating the depth in this outer area, blending up towards the brow. On the other eye, I'm going to show you a more rounded look. So where this is like, think more like your doll eye shape, okay? So like we're really going to be carving out the eye crease. So I'm actually going to start off with the lid using that O2 brush and that sort of like peachy vanilla And I'm just gonna place this right in the center of the lid, and I'm gonna stop when I see my skin like crease a bit. So like when you open up and look forward where that skin creases, I'm just gonna kind of diffuse, and I'm gonna do the same thing for the outer and inner third. Just diffuse that shade so that it's sort of like focused in the center, okay? Now I'm gonna go back into that caramely color from the Rare palette. And I'm gonna start off on the outer corner, the outer third. And rather than blending this out towards my tail, although you can mix these things together, so keep that in mind, these techniques. I'm gonna really focus it right in this V, and then I'm gonna bring it in. Start blending it into that crease. So wherever your brush kind of goes around your eye socket, again, this is going to depend on your eye shape. Then I'm gonna take that same brush, that same color, picking up a little bit more, and I'm gonna bring it into the inner part, the inner third. So again, just going around the eye socket, meeting up here. To really define that eye shape. Now, like I said, you can mix these techniques, okay? So you can take this technique, and then if you want to create a little bit more lift, you can implement this over here. I'm gonna go in to that chocolatey brown color to just like really reinforce this, because I want to really create that doll-eyed effect. So now I'm starting up in the center of the crease, and then I'm gonna slowly diffuse downward. Towards the inner and outer third. So you can see that difference? What? Much more rounded, much more defined crease. The center of the lid is really like popping forward, okay? It's making my like eyes look, I was gonna say bulbous. That's like not so cute, but just like more rounded, okay? Overall. Whereas on this side, we are softly diffused upwards and creating more of a lift and really brightening up this inner area. It really is going to come down to preference, but here's a side-by-side of these two techniques. I am using MAC Soft Ochre paint pot to prime my lids in case anyone was wondering. So I just removed this side, and I'm gonna leave the rounded side so that we can see this next to the third placement, which is going to be more of that elongated eye. So think like fox eye trend or whatever. So once again, we're gonna focus on a light inner corner. So I'm gonna grab that peachy cream, really focus this in the inner corner of the eye and then diffuse outward. I'm gonna grab the caramely shade on my eyeshadow brush, and we're gonna focus much more on an elongated placement. So rather than placing it in an upward angle, I'm gonna really drag from the outer lash line out straight. So rather than thinking end of the or tail of the brow, think temple. And then using a smaller brush, I'm going to grab my Refer 03 brush. I'm going to grab that dark brown, chocolatey brown, and I'm going to reinforce this further, just like really focusing on that outer corner of the lash line, the upper lash line. And again, not angling this upward, but just taking it horizontally. Okay, so you can see a big difference between these two looks, with the outer V being with the more vertical placement, we focused a lot up here, and with this more horizontal placement, we're not really touching the crease at all. We're much more focused on like a shadowy liner that's going outward, okay? And that's really going to create that more elongated look. looks so funny. Okay. I'm gonna remove that same side, actually. My lids are gonna be mad after this one, dude. They're gonna be mad after this one. Okay, and just for gigs, I want to show you a real droopy look, all right? So I'm gonna grab that Shoto brush, and I'm gonna grab the dark brown. And essentially, we're gonna place this on the outer part of the eye, and we're gonna blend it downward. So we're kind of following that same like idea of the first look, where I'm placing it in the outer corner and in this outer V, but rather than angling it upward towards the brow, I'm literally dragging it down. So I'm blending in a downward direction. So for the sake of the comparison, let's grab that little dark brown. I'm actually going to tap between the dark brown and the caramel. And I'm going to kind of accentuate over here on our more rounded eye look, the V towards the brow that we did in the first look. So you can obviously see a very big difference here, right? In this area where our intention was to blend in an upward direction, and on this side where our intention was to blend in a downward direction, okay? Placement was basically the same, but the direction which we were blending was very different. Okay, so if you are someone who has rounded eyes, I feel like this is something that comes up not as often as hooded eyes. Like, it is something that people just don't really talk about that much, but I've heard little like whisperings here and there. And also from my own experience of talking to friends who have round eyes, a lot of people feel like they can't get away with wearing eye makeup, that it's just like too much on their eyes. And one of the reasons for that I want to talk about is a round eye is already quite defined, okay? It's usually a little bit larger. If we think about round eyes, like think about like Disney, like think about cartoons, okay? They usually have these like larger round eyes that are very expressive and they're quite defined as is. Lots of people with round eyes will also have like relatively defined eye sockets, which helps to like create that rounded effect. And when someone like me who has like ever so slightly hooded lids, like when I'm placing a darker shade down in my crease, I'm doing it to define the eye, to create more definition of the eye socket, to really like create dimension to the eye. Someone who has a defined eye socket already has that. Their eyes are already defined. So oftentimes round eyes are going to look a little bit overwhelmed with more eye makeup. So someone who has round eyes is probably going to want to minimize. Something that can be really, really flattering, in my opinion, on a round eye is like a sort of a mid-toned shimmer all over the lid, dusted all over the lid. You can also do this with a matte or a satin. Keep in mind that using something a little bit lighter on the lid is going to create more of that rounded effect. So if you're really trying to avoid that, then you could skip shimmer or, you know, try to keep things a little bit closer to your skin tone in the value, meaning like light to dark. But that doesn't mean that you have to do neutrals. Like you can play around with color, like a really beautiful, just like wash of color all over the lid and sort of blend it up is going to look really, really gorgeous. And it's going to help your eye color pop. When it comes to liner, tight to the lash line, okay? Keeping it like tight lining, something tight to the lash line that's just going to sort of like fluff up the lashes a little bit more is going to be a lot more flattering than like a super sharp wing or something, because typically a rounded eye isn't going to look so flattered, isn't going to look so great with like a super high vertically lifted wing or even a fox eye wing. It kind of just like fights the shape. It fights that like cartoon roundness of a round eye. So do not fight your eye shape. This is going to go for every single eye shape. This is going to be really kind of annoying for basically everyone else, but almond eyes can pretty much get away with everything. Like it's going to depend very much on your like deep set, but like whether or not an eye is deep set Or if someone with almond eyes has like dark circles, like me, I have like very dark, I have a lot of darkness like in this area. So that is going to matter a lot more for almond eyes, but you can pretty much do everything. And like one of the most traditionally beautiful looks on almond eyes is kind of your classic lifted, like, you know, darker outer V lifted up towards the tail of the brow. You can play around with, you know, a darker inner corner or a lighter inner corner. That's going to depend more so on the width of your eyes, and we will get into that a little bit later. Downturned eyes, it's going to kind of depend on like what are you trying to go for. So downturned eyes can look really, really beautiful with like that puppy dog liner where you have a little bit more of a focus on the lower lash line, and rather than pulling straight out or straight up, you sort of swoop a little bit, swoop that liner a little bit to create a little bit more of a elongated lift, but it's not going to be as severe as your like fox eye or your typical sort of like defined outer V. That being said, if you feel like that sort of look isn't really what you're going for, like you feel like it sort of drags the eye down a little bit too much, what you can do is focus a little bit of a deeper shadow in the outer upper crease, just like a contour, something that's going to be like, you could use your bronzer, you could use your contour color, you could use a mix of the two. Again, you could use color if you're trying to get a little bit more like playful with it, but just creating a little bit more of that deep shade, like just above your lid in this sort of outer V, is going to help kind of like give that lift to the eye and balance out any shadow that you might be placing in like a puppy dog liner look. If you're doing a puppy dog liner or shadow placement and you feel like you get heavy-handed with that, you might want to start off with a little bit of that contour just above your outer corner while you're doing the rest of your face, like while you're doing the rest of your contour and base and all of that kind of stuff, to see how that balances. And then you can go in and do your puppy dog placement. It'll help you to be a little bit more understated and not quite as heavy-handed than the other way around. So it's going to kind of depend on like what problem you're trying to solve and what your tendencies are. Slightly hooded eyes like mine it's going to depend much more on your available lid space and how much room you have between like where your eye actually creases and your eyebrow, okay? So take someone like me who has a slightly hooded eyelid, like a little bit of it disappears when my eyes are open and forward facing. But I do have a lot of real estate between like this area where that skin folds and where my brow ends. So I have a lot of room to work with. I would say that I have more like almond shaped eyes with slightly hooded lids and a lot of real estate. That's how I would categorize myself. So bringing transition shades like I have today, slightly above where that shadow creases, where my skin creases, is going to be extremely effective in bringing a little bit more light to the lids, which obviously today I used just a matte light shade on my lid to bring it forward a little bit more and to make it not get like completely lost underneath those darker shades. And if I was to use a shimmer today, I would keep that on the visible lid and not really take it up too far. When you have skin that creases, like sometimes it can be difficult to maintain that. So I'm not like hard and fast with that rule. Hard and fast. Is that what I wanted to say? I kind of like blending a little bit of shimmer up above the crease. So it's really gonna come down to preference in my humble opinion. But if you are trying to keep the focus on the lid, then that's where you wanna keep the shimmer. Something that you want to avoid if you like me, you have slightly hooded lids, is actually, I recently did a video specifically about this that I'll link up here if you're interested, is focusing too much of the darker shadows in specifically that crease. So as you can see here, I focused the darker shade just slightly above, like when I tilt my head, you can see my skin starts to crease, it starts to fold right there. So I focused the darker shades just above that. If I were to take those dark shades and apply them heavy in that crease, it just sort of like creates like an overwhelming feeling of that skin folding. And I highly recommend checking out that video if you are someone who identifies with that, or if you have similar eye shape to me. It can end up just like emphasizing that fold and making this area of the eye feel really heavy and kind of droopy. Again, not that that's the end of the world, but if you're trying to avoid it, you want to keep that in mind. Okay, severely hooded lids are going to depend heavily on, again, how much space there is between your actual like lash line and your brow, which typically a severely hooded lid has a lower brow. So something that I want you to consider is simply applying a deeper shadow very, very close to the outer lash line, leaving the inner part, like the inner third and half of your eyes, more light. This is where you can have a little bit of fun and play with the inner corner when it comes to like shimmers and color. That can be like get creative there, okay? But when it comes to your dark shades, you really, really just want to focus on the very outer and upper lash line. That's it. Anything that you blend like down is going to really drag the eyes down further. If you are someone who has that fold that creases over, what you can do is kind of like pat that a little bit of that darker shade, like I said with the puppy dog eyes, create a little bit of a contour like at that skin that folds over so that you're pushing it back in space slightly. And you can experiment with like, if you are someone who is a little more like, I don't know, rock and roll, you know what I mean? And you want to take like a dark shadow like just above that crease, like placing the shadow in more of like a patting motion on that crease. Like imagine I have, you know, the fold right here. Placing a dark shadow like up there in kind of like a thick wing can look like really cool, like dragged out and up slightly towards the tail of the brow. That can look really, really cool. A look that I really want you to focus on if you want to experiment is, I'm going to pop it in right here. I don't remember the name of the actress, but this is a look that I talked about extensively that Miss Jo Baker did on this actress. I wish I could remember her name, who has very hooded eyes. And I love the way she handled this. Like, it is simple and yet it's extremely like playful and kind of edgy with like a spiky lash, and it's incredibly flattering on her very hooded lids. What you want to avoid if you have severely hooded lids is the like traditional crease placement. Like, it's just not gonna work for you, okay? You probably have a lot of excess skin that you're working with. You're not gonna want to follow your typical like YouTuber tutorial, all right? So let's talk about deep set eyes. So our focus is going to be to bring the eyes forward more so. And this is going to depend more so mostly on where you are deep set. For instance, based on my nose bridge, my eyes are more deep set in the center. They're not so deep set anywhere else. I tend to get quite a bit of darkness in here. And so I like to focus more light shades in this area so that it doesn't like get lost in the shadows, because I've already got dark circles, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to emphasize that. I mean, sometimes I am, but not always. So if you have deep set eyes, and especially if you have a like very defined eye socket, and typically those two things go together, what you want to focus on is more light shades, because it can get lost in that definition that already exists. So focus on light shimmer on the lid, and you don't even need to define the crease, just a light wash in the crease if you want to apply color there. But you want, in terms of like value, something that's going to catch the light, that's going to be light, that's going to reflect. You can obviously use a matte if you're not into shimmers, or you can focus more so on satins, but something that's going to have like a little bit of that pearl in it to catch the light is going to help really bring those eyes forward so that they don't get lost underneath your brow. Avoid a heavy crease. So avoid those dark shadows, avoid those super, super dark shadows like in the crease and on the lid. It's just going to overwhelm the eye, and it's going to get lost. It's going to look smaller. It's going to look overwhelmed and just like heavy. And you probably already have experienced that. So yeah. I love wide set eyes. Like, it's so annoying. I love wide set eyes. I wish I had them. I have more like close set eyes. Wide set eyes, you can really like experiment with your inner corner. And it's like one of my favorite things on a wide set eye, like to extend the inner corner. You want to make sure that you are balancing. So you can focus on the outer part of the eye, you should, but you want to make sure that that is balanced with the inner corner. So maybe using a smaller brush, something sized like this or something sized like this. This is the Refer 03 brush. And just like creating a little bit of definition in that inner corner with a darker shade to sort of balance the eye. Because if you are someone who has wide set eyes and you place a ton of light shadow in the inner corner and a ton of dark shadow in the outer corner, it's gonna make your eyes look so much wider. Okay, so you want to, you're like, most of this is us trying to create balance, right? That can actually make a person with wide set eyes look like their eyes are like pointing in different directions. All right, so like make sure you're keeping it balanced. And you can just bask in the fact that I'm incredibly jealous of you, and I've always wanted to have wide set eyes and like a flat inner corner so that I can play with like artistic liners and I could like take it in and it's gonna like actually extend and not just hit my nose. Oh, also for wide set eyes, avoid overextending. So you're not going to want to take a dark shadow like super far out, because again, it's just going to emphasize the wideness of the eyes. Yeah. Close set eyes, like mine are not like egregiously close set, but they are more close set. And today, for instance, I specifically placed my lights and my darks to make them not look so close set. You want to focus your lights on the inner, I don't know why I'm holding two of these. You want to focus your lights on the very inner third of the eye and your darks on the very outer third of the eye. Okay, so what we're doing with those lights and darks is we're sort of pulling the attention this way. When you place, if you have close set eyes and you place a bunch of dark shades in here and you don't extend the dark shades outward, you're really bringing the eyes in together. Okay, so like, something that I wish I could do is like a super extended inner corner. I can't do that. When I do want to do an extended inner corner, not an extended inner corner, but just like a more narrow inner corner, I take the tiniest brush that's ever existed, my EO6, the EO6 brush from Sigma, and I just like like the tiniest bit of shadow just at the inner corner. Okay, so if you really want to do that to create more of like a cat eye effect, you can do that, but you want to keep it as close to the inner corner as you possibly can, because the more you extend that, the more you are like just drawing the eyes inward. So make sure you are focusing the depth in the outer corner, the light in the inner corner, and avoiding putting dark shades in the inner corner. If you have very prominent eyes, if you feel like your lids come forward quite a bit and you want to reduce that, then you want to focus on darker shades on the lid to sort of like push the lid back a little bit. So focus on a darker shade all over the lid and then ever so slightly blending that up towards the crease and just kind of diffusing. But you want to focus the darkest shade like closest to the lash line and then really just like diffuse upward. Same thing with the lower lash line. I haven't really spoken about the lower lash line as much in this video. If you have like eyes that come forward a lot and you also have that on the lower lash line, you want to mirror it as well on the lower lash line. Otherwise, you're not going to have that balance. So in turn, you're going to want to avoid frosty, shimmery, really light shades on the lids, because what's it gonna do? It's just gonna bring that space forward. You really want to avoid like just defining like a rounded eye look that I did in the beginning. You really want to avoid that, okay? When it comes to monolids, creating dimension is going to be really important. I think the most flattering look, honestly on any eye shape, but particularly on monolids, is a gradiated liner, like soft and shadow softly gradiated upward in a more horizontal pattern. So not dragged out, but just like from the lash line and blended, slowly diffused upward. It's one of the most classic looks that you'll see on monolids. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Like, it's really beautiful. It helps to define the eye and create that dimension and shape without like fighting the shape of a monolid. Personally, I'm a huge fan. I think that monolids are absolutely beautiful because you have this like blank canvas to play with. And if you are someone who is like more advanced, you might not be watching this video, but if you are someone who's more advanced or you want to play with art, like, and liner and stuff, like, you have the perfect canvas for it. Like, it's it's beautiful. Like, I just think it's absolutely beautiful. What you want to avoid if you are trying to go for a more natural look is just like creating a fake eye crease where it isn't. If you have that flat plane, just putting like a hard like cut crease or something is going to just look like really forced and fake. You can focus a little bit more so in like a V shape on the outer corner. So you have some liberties. Like I said in the beginning, you can kind of like mix and match these a little bit depending on your eye shape, because not all eye shapes are exactly the same. Not all hooded eyes are exactly the same. Not all round eyes are exactly the same. So keep that in mind. But like I keep saying, don't fight your eye shape. Don't force anything that just isn't there. So if you don't really know where to start, I have a couple little tips, a couple of questions that you can ask yourself to basically like create your eye look easily, make it easy to figure out like which direction you want to go. So the first one is, do I want to lift or do I want to soften? Number 2 is, do I want to round out my eye look or do I want to elongate? And number 3, and in my opinion the most important, where should the darkest shadow go to achieve this? Then you can choose your placement. So if you want a lift, then you're going to focus your dark shade on the outer and upper corner. If you want to elongate, then you're going to pull it straight out. If you want something a little bit more rounded, then you're going to want to focus on more of a center contrast. And if you want balance, then you're going to focus on a soft gradient going horizontally upward. Some of the common mistakes that people run into, the number 1 is blending too low. So for instance, talking about my eye shape, rather than like placing a shadow ever so slightly upward and then gradiating upward, people will place it and then just kind of like go back and forth, and it sort of drags the product down, the color down, and it can end up doing the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. So it's really important to focus on like how you're holding your brush, and remember the direction in which we are blending. Another one is putting the darkest shade in the wrong placement. So make sure that wherever you're placing the shadow is where you want the majority of that shadow to go, okay? So for instance, when I am doing the outer corner out here where I want the darkest placement, that's where I'm starting. If I want this to be the darkest placement, I'm not starting up here, okay? I'm not starting by placing the shade right here. So wherever you want the darkest placement, start your placement there. Number 3, ignoring your eye shape. Like, I can't tell you how many times I receive comments from people who tell me their eye shape and then they're like, this is what I want to do, or this is what I'm struggling with. And I'm like, I can tell that you're fighting your eye shape. We have to be realistic. Like, makeup can only do so much. If you have severely hooded eyes, you're not going to do like a flawless cut crease. It's just not going to happen. Short of eyelid surgery. Like, it's just not going to happen. We have to be realistic about what makeup can do. And the most flattering makeup on us is going to be like in line with what we already have. So we're just defining what we have and not fighting what we have. Again, I'm a huge fan of avant-garde. I love to play. Like, I love just the art of it all. So if you want to say fuck it to the rules and just like go crazy, and you have severely hooded eyes and you're putting your eyeshadow in your brows, I fuck with that, okay? But if you're an everyday makeup wearer and you're looking for the most flattering thing, hopefully these help. And then obviously number 4, people just copying tutorials blindly, like not considering their eye shape. And this does sort of like, connect to that point that if you look at someone and you're following a tutorial blindly and they don't have anything close to your eye shape, it's not going to look the same. Which is why I caveat a lot of the time in my recreation videos that like, I do not look like this person. We have different eye shapes, we have different face shapes, we are different. We might have different skin tones. So it's going to look different on me no matter what. Now you can get close and you can kind of create the essence of what this person has, but it's going to take a lot of practice and understanding of your anatomy to be able to do that successfully. Always remember, blending is very important. It's not just about blending. It has to do with where you're putting the shadow, and it doesn't just have to do with where you're putting the shadow. It has to do with which direction you are blending that shadow. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know in the comments down below if there's anyone out there. I feel like I covered as much as I possibly could. I tried to think of all the eye shapes. But if I skipped anyone, or if you need clarification or anything, please leave me a comment down below. I'll try to get back to you, or maybe it'll prompt a version 2, a follow-up, a sequel to this video. Yeah, dude, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe and leave me a comment. Leaving a comment honestly is one of the best things for like the algorithm or whatever. So yeah, if you wanted to do that. And I don't know, dude, hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Oh, I just wanted to shout out these stunning earrings because they're absolutely incredible. I'm gonna link Sarah down below, but Sarah is a glass blower and she makes these earrings. I met her through Gabby, anyone on my channel who knows Gabby. Sarah Roller. Are these not, like, they're so beautiful. They're so beautiful, and she does the most beautiful glass work. I'm gonna link her down below. She creates this beautiful glass jewelry, and I know that I really need to do an updated jewelry video. So yeah, I'm sure I'll be talking about these in that video, but needed to shout that out. Okay, now I'm gonna go bye.